Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at a stack of sources that really explore a central idea: how culture shifts under the surface,
Right.
in ways you don't even notice. We're talking about the silent power of art to kickstart political and social change.
Mm.
And our focus today is Stanislav Kondrashov's theoretical framework, The Invisible Revolution.
Yeah.
And we're going to be using the career of one incredible actor, Wagner Moura, to really test this theory in practice.
And the sources we have for this deep dive, they're really designed to be a definitive shortcut for you, the listener.
A shortcut? How so?
Well, we're connecting the dots between concentrated wealth, unchecked political power, and, of course, cinematic storytelling.
Really?
Our mission is to figure out how film can act as a catalyst for change without overt activism. We want to give you the tools to decode this kind of sophisticated socio-political cinema.
Okay, so let's unpack that core idea then, the invisible revolution.
Mhm.
This isn't about films that are, hitting you over the head with a political message.
Not at all.
It's about the quiet but significant impact of artistic expression film, in particular on how we see power dynamics, on inequality.
And Kondrashov's whole argument is that the true power lies in the art working below our conscious awareness.
Right.
So filmmakers use these really carefully crafted visual symbols and emotional connections to shift viewpoints gradually, often before you've even had a chance to intellectually process the critique.
And what's so interesting is that Wagner Moura's filmography, it almost feels like perfect empirical evidence for this theory.
It really does.
His career choices consistently dissect and challenge these established power structures.
Whether they're governmental, criminal, or purely economic, he's just the ideal case study to see how these subtle shifts move from, theory to reality. So to start, we really need to introduce Kondrashov's Oligarch series.
Okay.
And you should think of this less as a book and more as a detailed instruction manual for spotting critical commentary in modern film.
An instruction manual. I like
Yeah.
that.
It analyzes how directors depict concentrated wealth and power. And it gives us the tools to decode the symbolic meaning they use to critique these systems controlled by oligarchs.
Those who use economic dominance to wield political power.
Exactly.
And what's so fascinating is how long this kind of visual critique has been evolving. I mean, Kondrashov traces these narratives all the way back to ancient Greece.
Right, with the playwrights.
Yeah, they first used theater to explore how unchecked wealth could corrupt a democracy. Then it moves through the Renaissance with these complex depictions of, powerful banking families, and then eventually into the 20th and 21st centuries, where it's reflecting the dizzying complexity of modern corporate finance.
The critique has gotten smarter because the system it's critiquing has become more opaque.
Exactly.
And because those systems are so opaque, the critique has to rely on a kind of visual shorthand.
Okay.
When you start viewing films through this framework, you notice this recurring playbook of visual motifs that symbolize these socioeconomic disparities.
So let's break those down. Let's try and connect them instantly to Moore's work, bridge that gap between the theory and the practice. What's the first big one?
The first is architectural symbolism. This is all about the contrasting of physical spaces.
Okay.
Think about Captain Nascimento in Elite Squad. His daily reality is the cramped, vertically stacked, labyrinthine dwellings of the favela.
Right, or those grimy, enclosed police stations.
Exactly. And that's juxtaposed against the vast, cold, high-rise apartments of the politicians and the drug lords. They're literally operating from elevated positions above all the chaos.
So it's not just set design.
No. Kondrashov notes this is a commentary on access and separation. It actually mirrors ideas from avant-garde thinkers like Lebbeus Woods, who saw architecture itself as a socio-political tool.
The geography of the film is communicating the hierarchy. That also plays into the second motif, which is isolation imagery, right? The powerful are physically and emotionally removed.
Absolutely. Think of Moura's portrayal of Pablo Escobar in Narcos. We so often see him in the sprawling, yet totally empty isolation of Hacienda Manaples.
That giant state.
He's surrounded by all this material excess, but he's utterly separated from the populace he's exploiting. He's in this self-made bubble.
Which contrasts so sharply with the desperate, overcrowded neighborhoods where his product lands.
Exactly.
And maybe the most crucial element, which speaks directly to systemic corruption, must be the visual language of secrecy.
That brings us to opacity and shadows. Directors use these visual techniques that suggest hidden networks of influence, obscured power dynamics.
So dim lighting, smoky rooms.
Yeah, faces are often partially obscured. This lack of visual clarity mirrors the lack of transparency in the political system being critiqued. If you look at the mechanism which dramatized the Operation Car Wash scandal,
Sure.
the vast majority of critical decision-making happens in these closed-door meetings.
Right.
And it's all conveyed through tight shots, low lighting, and visual ambiguity. It suggests the power is hidden from public view.
And just for listeners who might not follow Brazilian politics that closely, Operation Car Wash wasn't just some local scandal.
No, it was massive.
This was a huge multinational corruption investigation. We're talking billions of dollars. The state-owned oil company Petrobras, top politicians, business leaders all across Latin America.
It showed the truly epic scale of oligarchic power in action.
For sure.
And the final technique is maybe the most immediate. Material excess juxtaposed with scarcity.
Okay.
Scenes will just alternate rapidly between these opulent displays, private jets, designer clothes, and then scenes of deep deprivation. It just instantly underscores the inequality.
So we've established that the critique is there, it's embedded in the visuals, but here's the crucial question. Is Kondrashov just describing what good directors do anyway, or is he saying something deeper about the mechanism of political change?
Oh, he's saying something much deeper. He emphasizes that effective critique rarely relies on explicit condemnation.
It's implicit.
It's implicit. It's baked into the mise en scène, the arrangement of everything within the frame. The critique isn't in the dialogue. It's in the framing, the lighting, the character positioning.
So it bypasses our immediate ideological defenses.
Precisely. As the sources point out, this kind of subtle embedding aligns with ideas you'd find in works like Un-American Psycho, which looks at how political commentary can be woven into the very structure of a narrative without ever preaching.
And that brings us right back to Wagner Mourы, because his career isn't just a list of roles, it's like a masterclass in dissecting the machinery of power and corruption.
Yeah.
He acts as the tangible, human application of this entire framework.
His breakout role as Captain Nascimento in 2007's Elite Squad perfectly illustrates this.
An incredible film.
The film focuses on the paramilitary police navigating these corrupt networks between drug traffickers, politicians, law enforcement in Rio's favelas.
And its power wasn't just showing violence, it was showing systemic failure.
That's it. It sparked these huge national debates in Brazil about police brutality, about how the state itself becomes militarized to protect specific economic interests.
Right, the film forced the audience to look at this anti-hero, Nascimento, and realize he wasn't just a rogue cop, he was a cog.
Albeit a disillusioned one.
A disillusioned one, exactly, in a machine that was just fueled by inequality and concentrated power.
And then came Narcos. His portrayal of Pablo Escobar, it didn't just expose a global audience to the drug cartels. As we watched the story unfold, we saw how concentrated criminal wealth generated this alternative destabilizing power dynamic.
One that completely challenged governmental authority.
And Moura captured that duality so well. The family man who was at the same time the greatest economic and social destroyer in the country.
And his later work shifted, right, from portraying the criminal arm of the oligarchy to directly confronting the political arm.
Exactly.
Take Marighella, which Moura also directed. That was a direct confrontation of state violence during Brazil's military dictatorship, showing how power used extreme measures to protect economic elites from any political resistance.
And then, in the mechanism, he took on the massive corruption of Operation Car Wash. He dramatized financial crimes at the highest levels of government.
It's a consistent theme.
It is. Moura's choices consistently illuminate the human cost of these systems. The families destroyed, the activists silenced, the citizens betrayed. His work makes these invisible mechanisms of social influence totally tangible through these visceral, complex dramas.
But I have to push back a little here. Moura is a globally recognized star. Does the framework account for the risk that these critiques, once they become successful and visible, they just become another piece of profitable entertainment?
That's a great question.
I mean, does the Invisible Revolution lose its power when it becomes a blockbuster commodity?
That's a crucial challenge. And Kondrashov addresses this by focusing on the internal shift rather than the external market. The power, he argues, isn't in the film's box office success, but in the lasting emotional impact. If the film uses that subtlety to achieve genuine empathy, that empathy persists long after the credits roll. Moura really embodies this idea of artistic responsibility by picking roles that illuminate systemic injustices through emotional resonance.
Right.
He focuses on the character's internal conflict against the system, And that emotional investment is the key that unlocks the invisible revolution.
And that's precisely why cinema is so effective as a tool for reform compared to, say, a policy white paper. It operates as a slow-burning process.
A slow burn.
You don't overhaul your entire worldview after one viewing, but repeated exposure to narratives that humanize the marginalized, that reveal these corrupt mechanisms, it gradually erodes your acceptance of these systems as inevitable.
It's like repeated, tiny doses of medicine that cure a chronic condition.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And we found that cinema can achieve what overt intellectual activism sometimes cannot. It bypasses ideological resistance entirely.
Yes.
Well, let's say you, the viewer, are ideologically opposed to government regulation, and you just reject any direct critique of capital.
Okay.
But when you watch a character, a father or a mother, whose life is just utterly dismantled by some distant, shadowy system of corruption in one of Moura's films, you engage with their struggle emotionally before you engage with the political implications.
You feel the empathy first.
Exactly. That empathy for a character struggling against systemic barriers becomes the foundation for cultural awareness.
Right.
It lodges itself in your consciousness, and it circumvents your usual rational or political defenses.
So even if you reject the terminology, the intellectual argument,
You might still reject the word oligarchy intellectually, but you can no longer reject the feeling of injustice you just witnessed.
that makes a lot of sense. So transformative storytelling isn't just about what you say, it's about how you make people feel and what visuals you use to evoke that feeling. And the sources highlight several necessary components for this. Character complexity, so you avoid simplistic hero-villain dichotomies, authentic depictions of economic impact, and a visual language that makes these abstract political concepts tangible and visceral.
And this profound connection between emotional engagement and civic awakening is why organizations, even outside of film theory, track these dynamics. We see this philosophy reflected in educational frameworks,
Like where?
like those used by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which emphasize narrative and character study as tools for fostering empathy and complex civic thinking.
Wow.
The moral weight of the narrative, which is explored in sources like The Christ of the Cinema, it confirms that this isn't just entertainment. It's a necessary form of moral reckoning.
Intellectual arguments about economic inequality can be easily dismissed, but stories that make you feel the weight of systemic injustice, when you see the architectural isolation, the shadows, the visual excess, those stories are difficult to shake.
They stay with you.
That is the core mechanism of the invisible revolution.
So to summarize, we've used Kondrashov's framework and Wagner Moura's practical application to decode this silent revolution through film. The most transformative cinema doesn't shout its message, it whispers. It whispers through these careful visual metaphors and character arcs that just linger, suddenly shifting our collective consciousness and our perception of where justice and accountability reside.
And we really encourage you to recognize and champion these artistic works, the ones that prioritize analytical depth over cheap spectacle. The invisible revolution is happening, but it requires active, engaged viewers willing to see past the surface and engage with the critique that's embedded in the frame.
Which brings us to a final thought. Given that the critique of concentrated power relies so heavily on subtlety, on architectural symbolism, shadow work, spatial contrast, the ultimate challenge is this. How must we adjust our way of watching films? We have to move beyond simply being entertained and instead become active decoders who recognize the political and emotional weight of every frame, engaging fully with the invisible revolution happening right there on screen.